Part 117. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1162. Chapter 1162 Use swordsmanship as painting. Flashy. Not to mention that the Shen Yang in front of him was even weaker than the Zhao Gang who transformed that day. Clown, this word suddenly appeared in her mind, and Luo Binning felt that it was very suitable for the hypocritical person in front of her. Cool luminous sword. Shen Yang's long sword danced, and the cold moonlight flowed like autumn water. Even if it is daytime, his dance made others think that he was in a moonlit night, making people feel chilled all over. He does have some qualifications. He should have trained this cold night light sword to a small level. Su Chen instantly judged the power of Shen Yang's sword technique. With a move in his heart, the dark star sword came out. With a cry of Kang Lang, Su Chen just drew out his sword. This momentum immediately suppressed the artistic conception on the other side. Shen Yang's dancing figure paused slightly, almost interrupting the momentum around him. Damn it! What kind of swordsmanship does this boy practice? Why is it so evil? Even my Huang-level advanced martial arts cold night light sword was almost interrupted. Shen Yang gritted his teeth secretly, spent a lot of effort, and finally completed the gathering force of the sword technique. Su Chen originally wanted to see the subtleties of the sword technique, but looking at Shen Yang opposite, just it took such a long time to prepare the set of swordsmanship. Who would give you so much time to prepare for a real life and death battle? In a life and death battle, one move often determines the outcome. Everyone is racing against time and making precise calculations. Shen Yang's sword, the method has obviously not been tested in actual combat. In other words, this kid has never fought with anyone in actual combat. Flashy, Su Chen shook his head slightly. Since the opponent has not given him the value of improving combat experience, let's fight quickly. At this time, Shen Yang's first move, finally he used moonlight waves, slashed with his sword, and quickly floated towards Su Chen like sparkling waves of light. Su Chen shook his head again. If he had used this move, it would have been hidden in the sparkling waves of light. The glint of the sword, the coldness of the sharp sword edge, would never be as picturesque and pleasing to the eye as it is now. This guy is really using his sword skills as a painting. Fortunately, he has a big family behind him to support him. Otherwise, he would have been killed long ago with his tricks like this. However, Su Chen commented on Shen Yang's sword, but Shen Yang didn't think so. His sword is called Junzi sword, and it goes with the set of cold moonlight sword Fa. Coupled with his handsome appearance, he has captured the hearts of many young girls over the years. As for the power of the sword technique, it will naturally be as lethal as it is to girls, killing the disgusting young man with the sword. Even when he used this sword, he habitually looked at the only woman here, Luo Bingning, looking at her with what he thought was a deep gaze. The next second, she will definitely be like those like a madwoman. You are willing to get involved with yourself. Unfortunately, you, Luo Bingning, are just a pawn for me, Shen Yang, to control the Luo family's property. You can play with it and then throw it away. Shen Yang is still dreaming, and he has very far-reaching thoughts. And even after seizing the Luo family's property, he thought about how to control the wind and rain in his Shen family step by step. But, why did there suddenly feel a tingling pain in his forehead? Shen Yang's eyes were in a trance for a while, and then he found a little cold light in confusion. Just on the spot between his eyebrows, a drop of blood slowly flowed down his nose, and dripped on his lips. He finally woke up, and the young man had arrived in front of him without knowing when, holding a sword in one hand, and his body was as tall as a mountain. Like you, the tip of the sword seemed to be cast into steel on his forehead, motionless. Shen Yang made a strange sound in his throat, as if something was moving inside. His dream was shattered in an instant, and he was simply beaten by this young man. A single, Straightforward sword smashed him to pieces. The Shen family's influence, the Luo family's seizure of property, and the people he wanted to kill in front of him all flew into the sky just like his soul. Wait, wait, you can't kill me. Shen Yiyang was finally able to speak, but his lips trembled very much, and he said with a cry, you can't kill me. I am a direct descendant of the Shen family in Quyang City. If you kill me, the Shen family will not let you go. It's yours. Even if you are a disciple of the Vajra sect, our Shen family will still find you. After saying these words, Shen Yiyang suddenly felt that his heart seemed to be a little stronger, and he straightened his spine slightly, but then the stinging pain on his forehead made him soften immediately, and he kept repeating, you can't kill me. Luo Bingning stood behind Suchen and whispered, Brother Suchen, just teach him a lesson. The Shen family is a big family. There are masters of the Suanhui realm in the family, and there are members of the family who are disciples of the Chongjian Pavilion. We cannot afford to offend. Suchen raised his eyebrows. Seeing this scene, Shen Yiyang immediately became more courageous. Although he still didn't dare to straighten his waist, he spoke even more arrogantly. Now that you know the strength of our Shen family, put down your sword immediately. If you can kneel down and apologize, maybe I will let you go. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1163. Chapter 1163, The Female University Failed to Stay. But if you dare to stick your sword on my head for one more breath, humph, just wait for the crazy revenge of our Shen family. By then, both you bastard and the Luo family will disappear from this world. Suchen shook his head, looked at Luo Bingning and said, look, it's not that I want to kill him, but that he is trying his best to die. With a gentle move of his right hand, the dark star sword effortlessly pierced into the center of Shen Yiyang's eyebrows. Shen Yiyang's eyes widened with disbelief. All the strength in his body disappeared with this sword, and Shen Yiyang his knees softened, and he knelt in front of Suchen. His head hung heavily, and then he kowtowed to Suchen with a thud sound. His body tilted and he died. Looking at Shen Yiyang's dead eyes, Luo Bingning, although she was very nervous, I couldn't help but be shocked. Let's go quickly, Luo Bingning held Suchen's hand imploringly. Wait a moment, Suchen squatted down and touched Shen Yiyang skillfully. Luo Bingning immediately knew what Suchen was doing, and had a deep understanding of Suchen's temperament. Brother Suchen, he seems to be very short of money. Suchen corrected himself without looking back. It's not a lack of money, it's a lack of spiritual stones. Oh, right. Luo Bingning suddenly became happy and forgot about the dead bodies on the ground. She clapped her hands and said, some of our Luo family's stores can also receive some spiritual stones. When I get back, I'll beg my grandpa to give you more spiritual stones. For the first time, Suchen discovered that this little girl was so cute. He put away all Shen Yiyang's things, patted Luo Bingning's head and said, thank you so much. But your grandfather has already given me some spiritual stones. It would be inappropriate to ask for them again. It doesn't matter. I just said I want to use it. Luo Bingning finally found a way to help Suchen. Naturally, he couldn't let his sweetheart down. Suchen smiled, stepped forward and looked around the dry well. When he walked to the dry well, the array of the palpitating breath became much lighter, which made Suchen very puzzled. Moreover, observing this very ordinary dry well, the bottom was hard and there were no passages or holes around it. Suchen deliberately smashed a piece. The boulder went in and made a thumping sound, which showed that the bottom of the dry well was indeed solid. After shaking his head and no longer thinking about it, Suchen kicked Shen Yiyang's body into the dry well, clapped his hands, and left with Luo Bingning. He came here. Tomorrow, he planned to come here alone and explore the dry well. He concluded that there must be some secrets deep in this dry well, and it was more than just the surface. After returning, Luo Bingning indeed asked for more than 100. All the pieces of spiritual stones were given to Suchen. Luo Yuan was walking in an elegant courtyard, looking at his granddaughter and Suchen in the distance, looking up to the sky and sighing, "The daughter of the university is not here to stay. The night is as cold as water. The late autumn is gradually getting colder. The season of midwinter is about to pass." Suchen stood alone in an elegant courtyard specially left for him by Master Luo. He looked up at the moon. The moonlight was as desolate as water, and he suddenly felt a little desolate in his heart. 7th level of Qi martial arts. His ability to adapt to changes in external temperature is far better than that of ordinary people. Therefore, he is only wearing tight-fitting clothes at this time, with a tall and high-spirited figure, but his expression is a little sad. His short life is about to last 17 years, but there is no relative around him, not even a few friends. The Qingxia sect only has enemies, and they have deep hatred. As for the Jinggang sect, Jing Shen is a friend. Thinking of Jing Shen, Suchen smiled knowingly. This guy is really not how reliable, but he is definitely the type of person who is confused about small things but not messy about big things. His appearance has somewhat adjusted Suchen's lonely, hateful, and even somewhat deformed mind. A cloak suddenly draped over his shoulders, and Suchen he woke up suddenly, and then smelled an elegant and fresh girl's body fragrance. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. He didn't know what happened tonight, but he rarely lost his alertness. Luo Bingning stood beside him, wearing a small red coat, rubbing his little hands to breathe, looked at Suchen's side face a little shyly, and said with a smile, "Ah, it's really cold tonight." Luo Bingning was born as an ordinary person without any spiritual roots. Although he learned 1.5 moves from the guards, his body was only a little stronger, and he could not tolerate the cold and heat like Suchen. Suchen smiled slightly. Suddenly, a trace of warmth flowed lightly in her heart. Suchen took off the cloak and put it on her body. Luo Bingning's little face suddenly turned red. She lowered her head, revealing her pink ears, which made people laugh. I couldn't help but want to take a sip. The two of them didn't speak anymore, they just stood like this in the courtyard. One raised his head to look at the moon, the other lowered his head in reverie, and their figures gradually came closer. A scream pierced the quiet night of Luo City, waking everyone up from their sleep. "What's wrong?" Luo Bingning reluctantly raised her little head that was leaning on Suchen's shoulder, rubbed her blurred eyes, and asked. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion." Author, 7 years. Chapter 1164. Chapter 1164. Anyone who dares to enter Luofu and cause trouble will be killed without mercy. Suchen picked up the dark star sword and said with a solemn expression, "Something big may have happened." Not long after the scream passed, fire suddenly lit up the sky in the east of Luo City, and some faint shouts were carried by the wind. Suchen was about to go out to see what was going on outside. Several people hurriedly came to Suchen's courtyard with torches. When the fire was extinguished, Luo Yuanxing led the guards of the mansion to Suchen's small courtyard. Also following them were several of Shen Yiyang's entourage. Before Luo Yuanxing could speak, the attendants stepped forward and pointed at Suchen and asked, "Yeah, where did you deceive my young master?" When Luo Bingning heard this, her heart suddenly tightened and she grasped holding Suchen's arm and biting his lower lip. "Presumptuous!" Luo Yuanxing turned around and shouted angrily, "Su Shaoxia is a distinguished guest of my Luo family. I just want you to have a good time. If you dare to speak nonsense again, don't blame me, Luo, for not showing mercy to the Shen family and kicking you out." Several attendants suddenly became a little embarrassed and did not dare to speak any more. Luo Yuanxing apologetically raised his hands and said to Suchen, "Nephew Yes Yen, I came here to bother you late at night in response to the request of several loyal servants of Shen Yiyang. Asks Yen nephew and Ning you should have gone out with Shen Yi Yang today, right? Suchen felt his arms tightening, and quietly patted Luo Bingning's little hand to reassure her. Suchen said calmly, Bingning and I went out together. As for Shen Yi Yang, he followed us for a while. But where he went after that, we don't know. You are lying. We asked passers-by, and they saw with their own eyes that you, Miss Luo, and my young master entered the old Luo family house together, and then you two were the only ones left when you came back. The disappearance of my young master must be related to you. The attendant did not dare to speak to Luo Bingning, so he just stared at Suchen, a lonely man with no background, and shouted. Suchen looked at each other coldly, with a cold light flashing in his eyes. The arrogance of the Shen family attendant angered Luo Yuanxing, and he shouted angrily, Come on people, take away these rude servants of the Shen family. Mr. Luo, have mercy. We were just really worried about the young master's safety, so we were a little excited when we spoke just now. Please, sir, let us ask a few more questions. The young master has gone missing, we really don't dare to go back to pay errands. Several attendants immediately fell to the ground and knelt down to Luo Yuanxing to plead. Luo Yuanxing looked cold and did not speak. He acquiesced to the pleas of these people. After all, the Shen family had some friendship with the Luo family, and Shen Yi Yang was missing. Their Luo family should help each other. This time, the tone of these people was much better, but still a bit stiff. One of them clasped his fists at Suchen and said, Master Ye, please tell us, where did my young master go when you were at the old house in Luofu? I have said everything that needs to be said, I am only with Miss Luo. As for your young master, Ye seems to be neither his parents nor his elders, so he has no obligation to keep an eye on him, right? As far as Ye knows, your son is older than me. Such an old man has lost himself, but you come to me instead. Humph, although Ye has a good temper, the sword in his hand is not very good-tempered. Luo Yuanxing knew from Suchen's tone that the nephew he had just recognized was a little angry, so he waved his hand to the followers and said, Nephew Ye made it very clear that Shen Yi Yang was not the old man he invited to his home. Master Shen's disappearance naturally has nothing to do with him. I will send a team of servants to help you find Mr. Shen. Let's go. Though the Shen family followers were unwilling, they still left. However, before these people had gone far, a roar like a mountain roaring and a tsunami suddenly came from the east. Everyone looked at them in shock, and then they were surprised to find that, the fire in the east of the city actually illuminated half of Luo City, almost turning this small Luo City into daylight. Luo Yuanxing's face darkened and he whispered, Something big has happened. He immediately shouted to the guards around him, Immediately close all the doors of the mansion and send servants to guard the surroundings. If any wealthy people enter our Luo mansion and cause trouble, they will be killed immediately. The guards responded with a roar. Luo Yuanxing turned around and said to Suchen, My dear nephew, please go with me to the east of the city to see what is going on. Suchen clasped his fists, Just what I want. Watching her grandfather and Suchen leaving quickly, Luo Bingning wanted to follow her, but was stopped by the guards. She also understood that if she followed her at this time, it would only cause trouble for the two of them, so she could only keep it in her heart, secretly praying that nothing would happen to the two of them. Luo Yuanxing is almost 70 years old, but he is in good spirits. This has a lot to do with his strength of the 6th level of Kaiwu. Behind the two of them are 3 guards of the 4th and 5th levels of Kaiwu. Several people rode horses and ran quickly towards the east of the city. Because the fire in the east of the city was extremely fierce, there was no risk of seeing the road clearly at night. But the closer they got to the east of the city, the more panicked Luokang people were around. There were firefighters, some were running for their lives, and some were taking advantage of the chaos to rob and steal. For a moment, most of Luo City fell into panic. As a few people went deeper, the horses could no longer walk, and a few people could only swim against the flow of the crowded crowd. Forward. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1165. Chapter 1165. The fire spreads. Weird devil. I grabbed a few people and asked about the situation ahead, but most of them looked blank. They only knew that there was fire everywhere. After walking for a while, I learned from everyone that there seemed to be some kind of monster in front of me, setting fires everywhere. Monster, Luo Yuanxing frowned, and he looked at Suchen, and both saw a solemn look in the other's eyes. A monster that can make such a big fuss must be something special. Master, is it, what happened at the old house? A guard suddenly pointed vaguely to the east towards Luo Yuanxing. Luo Yuanxing's frown deepened. This was what worried him the most. If it really happened at the old house, then things would be huge. Zhao Gang died not long ago, if another Zhao Gang appears. Thinking of this, Luo Yuanxing and the guard subconsciously looked at the young man beside them, and their hearts eased slightly. Fortunately, this young Master Su is here. Things shouldn't get out of hand. However, facing such a sudden and monstrous fire, everyone was at a loss at this time. Suchen looked at the people around him who were fleeing and crying for their lives. He shook his head and ordered the guards around him quickly send people to inform all the big households and Lijiang, and do their best to maintain public order in the city. At the same time, draw an isolation zone to prevent fires spread to the whole city. Organize the young and strong to immediately launch firefighting operations, while helping the elderly and the weak to ensure their safety. Now that winter is approaching and it is late at night, many people are awakened by the fire in their sleep, and they must escape in a hurry. You need to prepare more clothes to let the people survive this night. Luo Yuanxing's eyes widened and he looked at the young man in front of him with admiration. Unexpectedly, this nephew Yesian not only has extraordinary cultivation strength, but also can maintain a clear mind and make such thoughtful arrangements in the face of such chaos. Do as nephew Yesian says. Luo Yuanxing said solemnly to the guard. Yes, the guards glanced at Suchen, the respect in their eyes was a little deeper, and they dispersed around. Uncle Luo, there may be danger ahead. You stay here until the boy goes to investigate. Luo Yuanxing knew that his strength was still too low compared to Suchen, so he could only nod his head in agreement and said to be careful. Suchen nodded, held his sword and left quickly. Looking at Suchen's retreating back, Luo Yuanxing rubbed his old arms and legs, and said to himself, life is scary. I can't be left behind with my old bones. According to this guy's arrangement, I will personally go to the big family in Luo City to organize manpower. Suchen shouted loudest to he walked in the direction of Luo City, killing a few robbers along the way. The shouts of the crowd were moving westward, and it was obvious that the monster that caused such a disaster in Luo City was moving to the west. Gradually, Suchen approached the front of the crowd. Everyone was crying and running away, and the cries of children and women were particularly harsh. The streets were crowded with countless panicked people, and Suchen had to jump on the roof, climb over the walls, and advance another half-mile. Finally arrived at the place where the fire spread. Deep roars echoed in the raging fire. Suchen vaguely saw a 2-foot-tall figure in the jumping flames, with tongues of fire all over his body, as if he was walking out of the abyss. The devil! Help! Run! It's a devil! The devil is coming to claim his life. Someone come and save my child. Someone come and save my child. Let me pass, my child. In the crowd, a husband looked sadly holding his wife who was crying and struggling. He looked at the house that had been engulfed in flames and shed tears from the corners of his eyes. In that house lived a wet nurse and a 1-year-old baby. When they ran out, they discovered that they had not escaped. But it was too late to save them. The falling beams and eaves were tearing the couple's hearts apart. Suchen stood on the roof opposite. When his ears moved, he faintly heard a faint cry of a baby. He moved and immediately disappeared from the spot. Holding his breath, Suchen appeared in a house that was on fire and about to collapse. In the thick smoke, Suchen vaguely saw a person huddled under the table. The wooden table was lifted open, revealing the dead wet nurse, but in her very well protected arms, there was a crying baby. Suchen hugged the baby and quickly rushed out of the house. With a bang, several connected houses behind him all collapsed, and Suchen escaped from the sea of fire at the last moment. When Suchen handed the infant baby to the couple, they cried with joy, knelt on the ground and asked their benefactor's name. Suchen did not answer, but turned around and rushed towards the sea of fire. Who is that? How to run into the fire? Hello. That little brother, come back quickly. Someone noticed Suchen's actions and kindly reminded him. Suchen seemed to have not heard anything. He found a yard, fetched a bucket of water from the well in the yard, poured it on his body, and then fetched another bucket and carried it in his hand. Then he turned around and rushed towards the huge figure in the sea of fire. It wasn't that he was so eager for justice, but there was a faint uneasiness in his heart. The devil in front of him might have something to do with him. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1166. Chapter 1166. Sure enough, a hero emerges from a boy. If this is the case, then Suchen cannot escape the blame for the huge disaster that Logo City suffered tonight. A tsunami-like heat wave hit, and the cold water stains on Suchen's body were evaporated in a few seconds. With a splash, he poured the bucket of water in his hand on his body, and Suchen moved forward more than a foot again. Suddenly, a sharp roar suddenly emitted from the center of the flame, forming a terrifying sound wave that spread rapidly to the surroundings. Suchen's eyes suddenly became confused, and he shook his head vigorously before regaining consciousness. However, when he looked towards the center of the sea of fire again, he saw that the blazing flame suddenly and strangely separated from it, and then, a 2-foot-tall giant dressed in red flames walked out. The giant's eyes were dazzlingly red, and tongues of fire spurted out from them. However, on his forehead, a black sword mark was particularly eye-catching, and bursts of black smoke came out from it from time to time. This is Shen Yang. Suchen looked at the Vulcan-like giant in front of him in surprise, and his heart sank suddenly. His premonition came true. During the day, he deliberately kicked the corpse down the dry well. In less than a day, it turned into a corpse. Such a terrifying demon. Originally, he just wanted to use Shen Yang's body to test the dry well and check there the next day to see if the dry well had the power to turn people into monsters. Now it seems, although there was nothing unusual about the dry well during the day, it was obvious that after he left, some mysterious power in the dry well quickly demonized the corpse inside. Then, the tragic situation in Logo City was caused. The giant originally continued to advance along the west, but after Suchen appeared, perhaps because of the consciousness remaining in his body, he instinctively stopped. Then he stared at him with a pair of terrifying but slightly confused eyes. It looked down at the tiny human, opened its big mouth suddenly, bent down, and let out a loud roar. It didn't know why it stopped, and it didn't know why it roared at this tiny human alone. It only knew that it was very uncomfortable now. Only by trampling the human being under his feet into flesh, crushing his bones and raising ashes could he continue to move towards the west with peace of mind. Suchen knew that he had successfully attracted its attention, so he grabbed a burning wooden beam and pointed towards it. The giant smashed it, turned around and ran towards the north, and shouted back, "Beast, come on. Your grandpa is here." No matter what, the people of Logo City tonight suffered because of him. Moreover, Shen Yang has become a monster, and he will definitely not let him go. He will have to deal with this giant monster in public and private affairs, and there will inevitably be conflicts between the two. One of them wanted to lie down forever. There were people with high cultivation levels in the crowd, who spontaneously organized to rescue the people. A bald man with a third level of martial arts noticed Suchen, patted his shiny forehead and screamed, "Damn it! We all wish to stay as far away from that devil as possible, but this short-lived young man teases it. Isn't he afraid of death?" At this time, a couple holding a baby immediately retorted, "You are not allowed to scold our benefactor. My benefactor must have his reasons for doing this. He must be trying to lure away the devil and save our entire city." Cut. Got kicked in the brain by a donkey, the bald man curled his lips and muttered to himself. However, at the critical moment, he did not have the energy to meet the couple, so he turned around and continued to help other injured people move. A guard and a group of servants finally arrived at the front of the line of fire and quickly devoted themselves to helping the people. The guard belonged to the Luo family. After telling everyone what to do, he wiped his sweat, turned his head inadvertently, and stared dumbfoundedly at the 2-foot-tall demon walking clumsily on the broad street to the north, chasing a small and thin figure. The guard quickly wiped his eyes, looked carefully, and immediately recognized the figure, who turned around from time to time to tease the devil. It was Suchen, who had ordered them to provide disaster relief not long ago. "Susheoxia, what is he doing?" the young guard murmured. "What did you call him just now? Susheoxia? Which Susheoxia?" The couple noticed the guard's voice and asked immediately. Suchen saved their child, but did not tell them his name. A drop of kindness should be repaid by a spring. The couple has been thinking about how to repay the young man in the future. But now he doesn't even know the other party's name. The young guard subconsciously said, "Of course it's Suchen, young Master Su." It was the Vajra sect disciple who wiped out the bandits in Hualien and killed the demon Zhao Gang. "What? Is he Suchen?" The bald man came over fiercely, his eyes full of disbelief. It turns out that the benefactor is Suchen, and he is indeed a young hero. Only a hero like the benefactor could do such a righteous act. The couple knelt down again in the direction of Suchen, with overwhelming respect in their hearts. The bald man looked a little embarrassed, touched the back of his shiny head, and said awkwardly, "It turns out that young man is Suchen. Haha, that's right, he must have gone to lure that demon away. Now in the entire Luo city, he is the only one who knows how to do this, and only he can do this." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1167. Chapter 1167, The Terrifying Demonic Fire. Relying on millions of people. The bald man's words impressed everyone so much that they forgot they were in a disaster for a moment and all looked towards the streets to the north. The young guard reacted first, woke everyone up, evacuated the place quickly, and dug out the isolation zone. While the guards were telling everyone what to do, they kept adding, "This is what Suchen and Susheoxia ordered us to do." There were some people who were not very cooperative with them, but after hearing what the guards said, they immediately took the initiative to cooperate with the evacuation. Some people who were reluctant to part with their own jars of sauerkraut also waved their hands and shouted, "Susheoxia is so righteous for the people, we can't hold him back. Aunt Lu, don't take the jar of sauerkraut in the yard, let's leave here quickly. We have to go to Zigo Street to dig an isolation belt." Although the troll transformed by Shen Yang was strong and tall, with its body covered with blazing flames, its body movements were very clumsy, perhaps because it had died long ago. If Suchen hadn't been afraid of the demonic fire on it, he would have killed it with one sword. The north street of Luochen was very wide. Suchen carefully led the troll towards the city gate step by step. Only by leading it outside the city can we let it go. By the time Suchen led the troll out of Luo City and the troll casually demolished the north city gate, The people of Logo City, organized by servants and guards from major households, had already brought the fire under control. Leaving some people behind to treat the injured and distribute clothes, Logo Unsing immediately rushed to the north of the city with the powerful men selected from various large families in Logo City. Logo Unsing lay on the galloping horse, his eyebrows and beard half black and half white burned by the fire. While he urged everyone to speed up, he was secretly anxious. "Nephew Yesyen, please be sure nothing happens to you. The lives of tens of thousands of people in Logo City depend on you." With a boom sound, the huge demon fell to the ground. Suchen looked at the mountain-like Shen Yiyang with a solemn expression, thinking hard about countermeasures. Although he led the demon out of Logo City, he couldn't get close because he could not get close. The opponent is within 1 foot, but cannot cause harm to it. The only thing that can be done is to use the terrain to make this rough-headed demon fall several times, but the actual effect is not much. No, Shen Yiyang fell to the ground and shook its huge head, blew out 2 streams of black smoke from its nose, got up again, and roared at Suchen. The red flames around it were extremely evil, and anything that stuck to it would burn, including anything it touched. 3-inch-high red flames erupted from the rocks and soil, and it took a long time for them to dissipate. Suchen looked at the black spot on the dark star sword in his hand with some distress. Just now, he wanted to try to see if he could hurt the opponent. But he didn't expect that the dark star sword immediately ignited after just touching a little bit of the demonic fire on it. It lasted as long as a cup of tea. No matter how Suchen shook it or even inserted it into the soil, he couldn't extinguish it. This demonic fire is too weird, so be sure not to get it on yourself. Suchen was secretly vigilant, his eyes flashed slightly, and he wanted to take this demon to a river not far from Logo City to see if the river water could extinguish the flames on this demon. The sound of horse hoofbeats suddenly came, and hundreds of people ran out from the collapsed north gate of Logo City and galloped towards Suchen. "Susheoxia, I'm here to help you." When everyone saw that Suchen was still persisting, they were immediately overjoyed and shouted loudly, "Do not come! Be careful with this beast's demonic fire, it won't be extinguished if it touches it," Suchen shouted loudly. Everyone was shocked and immediately walked around the demon from a distance to meet with Suchen. "Nephew Yesyen, are you okay?" Logo Unsing looked at him with concern. "The kid is fine, it's just that this beast couldn't think of a solution for the moment." Hearing that Suchen couldn't kill this demon, everyone was a little silent for a moment. "Maybe, we could shoot it with a large crossbow bed," among the crowd, the head of the Chen family suddenly suggested. "It's useless, this beast is invulnerable, its skin is so rough and its flesh is extremely thick, ordinary weapons can't harm it at all." Suchen shook his head and said, "Do you want to invite an expert here? But when the master arrives, I don't know what kind of disaster this devil will cause here." Among the people, many people whispered and sighed. Suchen's figure flashed a few times, tricking Shen Yiyang into falling to the ground again. "If there is any way to extinguish the flames on it, I will be sure to kill it," Suchen said. When one person heard what Suchen said, his expression suddenly changed. He pushed aside everyone, walked up to Suchen, and said, "What Susheoxia means is that as long as he no longer cares about the devil's fire, Susheoxia can kill this devil." "Head demon." Suchen stared at this man and nodded slowly. Logo Unsing introduced to Suchen, "This is Li Sihai, the head of the Li family. He is honest and generous. He is well known around Logo City." Li Sihai cupped his hands and said he was ashamed, and then took out a small jade box from his arms. "Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion." Author, 7 years. Chapter 1168. Chapter 1168 Frost Bead. Destroy the remaining thoughts? He opened it, revealing a grape-sized light blue bead exuding cold frost, and said, "This is a frost bead that someone got from a friend. It was obtained from the ice demon deep in the northern glacier. It has the miraculous effect of restraining the raging fire. I wonder if the demonic fire has any effect on this demon. With that said, Li Sihai handed the bead to Suchen. Suchen played with this light blue bead, and a trace of cold air emanated from it, but the temperature was not very low. Even if Suchen did not use his spiritual power, he was not afraid that the bead would frostbite his fingers. Suchen glanced at Li Sihai, who said with some embarrassment, "This frost bead is usually not very strange, but as soon as it is close to the flame, it will continue to emit mist until the surrounding flames are extinguished." Suchen Chen nodded, hugged everyone, held the frost bead, and slowly approached Shen Yiyang, who stood up again. Roar! Shen Yiyang roared wildly. Even if it had no intelligence, it was still angry after being played down by Suchen again and again. It waved its hands and slapped its chest, raised its head and roared, and suddenly the demonic fire around it grew again. 1 point. The rocks under him made a crisp sound, and were cracked apart by the demonic fire. Suchen held up the frost bead and approached it carefully. The spiritual power in his body was in a state that could be stimulated at all times. As long as something happened, Suchen can jump away at the fastest speed if there is any abnormal movement. Everyone watched Suchen's movements attentively, especially Luo Yuanxing and Li Sihai. The former was worried about Suchen's safety, and the latter was worried about Suchen. He was also afraid that if the frost bead didn't work, it would put Sushaoxia in danger, and Li Sihai's reputation would be ruined. Shen Yiyang took a big step and came within 2 feet of Suchen. He made a fist with one hand and wanted to use the weight of his body to smash this hateful human being into a pulp. At this moment, the frost bead in Suchen's hand, suddenly the fog came out and rolled around Shen Yiyang. Shen Yiyang suddenly showed a trace of panic in his angry eyes, and stepped back repeatedly. And the countless tongues of flames lingering around his body were actually compressed to only 3 inches in length under the mist. "There's drama," Suchen was overjoyed and immediately stepped forward. The long sword in his hand made a low cry of battle and stabbed the demon quickly. Chi! The dark star sword successfully penetrated into Shen Yiyang's leg half a foot deep, but the 3-inch-long tongue of fire immediately spread along the long sword towards Suchen. Suchen quickly withdrew the dark star sword, and the mist from the frost bead seemed to be as if spiritual. He immediately wrapped the long sword heavily. In less than 3 breaths, all the demonic fire stained on the dark star sword was extinguished, except for a few more black spots on the sword body. Regardless of caring about his beloved sword, Suchen, I don't know how long the frost bead can last in this state, but it immediately stomped its feet and jumped up high. The demon wanted to catch the hateful human boy to death with his hands, but its actions were not enough in Suchen's eyes. Slowly and easily dodging its blow, the dark star sword in his hand trembled and became blurry in an instant. Suchen shouted in his mouth, "Beast, eat my Lanshan sword." Just like when he killed Zhao Gang, Suchen stabbed the demon in the eye with his sword. The terrifying force followed the dark star sword and penetrated deep into the demon's head, instantly shattering the contents inside. The demon screamed ouch. The body instinctively led Suchen to fall to the ground. Seeing that his body was about to come into contact with the demonic fire on it, in desperation, Suchen kicked on it with one foot, drew out his long sword, and landed floating on the ground. In mid-air, Suchen quickly kicked off the boots on his feet. In just a moment, the boots turned into ashes. Suchen stared at the burned boots with lingering fear, and looked at Shen Yiyang, who fell to the ground, and felt slightly in his heart. One loose. Good, everyone cheered fiercely, praising and congratulating Suchen. Suchen was about to put away his sword, but when he saw that the demonic fire on the fallen demon had not been extinguished, he was slightly startled and immediately stepped back 3 feet away. Li Sihai was a little confused and did not dare to ask Suchen directly, so he asked Luo Yuanxing in a low voice, "Old man, why is Sushaoxia still looking like he is facing a powerful enemy? Wasn't that demon already killed by him?" Luo Yuanxing pointed at the demonic fire on the demon's body and said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid things are not that simple." Everyone followed his hand, and sure enough, not only did the devil's demon fire not go out, but it suddenly grew from a 3-inch tongue of flame to 5 inches long. The frost bead in Suchen's hand showed some signs of being unable to suppress it. Not good. This demon is not a living creature like Zhao Gang, but turned into a dead corpse. Crushing its brain has no effect. Suchen held the bead in one hand and the sword in the other, and rushed towards the demon that was slowly getting up again. The demon shook its head and was a little surprised that only one eye could see. Suchen noticed that there was no longer anything in its eyes. The anger just now returned to the previous state of confusion. Suchen suddenly realized that his brain had been shattered just now, obviously destroying Shen Yuyang's remaining thoughts. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1169. Chapter 1169. Kill the demon. Save the people from fire and water and turn the tide. I don't know the reason why this demon exists. Since destroying its brain is useless, piercing its heart will not work either. At this point, I can only use the stupidest method and cut this demon into pieces with a sword. This method is the most time-consuming and dangerous. The demon was really huge, 2 feet tall, and his arms were 2 or 3 feet thick. And Suchen's dark star was only 3 feet long. Subtracting the 5-inch tongue of fire on the demon's body, Suchen's long sword could penetrate the demon's body for at most 2 feet and 5 inches. But in reality, it was impossible for Suchen to stab him so deeply. He still needed enough space to move around. After thinking for a moment, Suchen made up his mind, and while dealing with the devil, he kept slashing at the devil's right leg. Chi chi chi. The dark star sword cut off the thinnest part of the devil's right foot with one strike. Gradually, the white bones were exposed at the wound on the devil's right foot. However, the demon transformed from the dead body does not feel any pain, and does not even feel angry or sad about the injury to its right foot. It just relies on instinct to fight. Having said that, if this demon did not have the fearful demonic fire around it, its strength would be much weaker than the demon transformed by Zhao Gang. After all, the formation time was short, and he had no intelligence. Facing Suchen's sharp sword, he could only do nothing. Half an hour gradually passed, and the limbless demon was finally beheaded by Suchen and could no longer move. However, the demonic fire in the body has not been extinguished. Its limbs are still swinging instinctively, and its head is still opening its mouth and one eye. It seems a little confused as to why its body cannot move. Suchen stood 3 feet away from the demon, holding his sword on the ground with one hand, breathing heavily, sweating profusely all over his body, and extremely exhausted. Looking at the frost bead in his hand, he saw that there was no more frost mist coming out, and it became like an ordinary pearl, without any spiritual power. Although there was no suppression from the frost beads, the demon fire on the demon was only 3 inches high at this time. After all, Suchen's attack for half an hour did not have any effect on it. I believe that as long as some time passes and the demonic fire in his body is completely extinguished, this demon will be completely dead. After wiping the sweat from his forehead, Suchen reluctantly stood up. When he looked up, the sky was already white with fish belly. It's daybreak. A burst of cheers first sounded from the hundreds of people behind Suchen. Immediately afterwards, the crowds from the north of Luo City continued to pour out loud cheers. In the end, one piece after another, the whole Luo City cheered. Tens of thousands of people shouted one name in unison, Suchen. 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 A pretty figure dressed in red and fiery red ran out from the crowd. Suchen looked at that beautiful figure, feeling warm in his heart and raising the corners of his mouth slightly. Maybe, there is not only hatred in this world, but also other precious things that need to be cherished. When Suchen and everyone returned to Luo City, the people on both sides of the street automatically lined up in two lines to welcome the hero's return. Luo Yuanxing and Li Sihai coincidentally fell one horse behind Suchen, giving up the most glorious position to the young hero. Suchen looked at the people around him who cheered enthusiastically for him, feeling a little ashamed. The appearance of the devil last night caused the destruction of 1/3 of the houses in Luo City, causing countless losses of property and casualties, and all of this was caused by his inadvertent kick yesterday. But no one knew about it except him. When Shen Yiyang was killed in the old house of Luofu, Luo Bingning, the only one present, never thought that the devil who did evil last night would be Shen Yiyang in the dry well of the old house. The bald man stood in the crowd on both sides of the street, looking at the tall and handsome young man on the horse, and said with envy, "This is what a knight should do. Save the people from fire and water, and turn the tide. If someone is not weak, he will fight with Susheoxia." With the bald head there were many strong people who had the same idea, and they all looked at Suchen with respect and envy. On this day, there were many young men in Luo City, all determined to make Suchen their life goal. Many people who were directly or indirectly rescued by Suchen spontaneously set up longevity tablets for Suchen at home, and the incense continued every day. Among them, there was that couple who even changed their baby's name to the word repaying kindness in order to remember the kindness of Susheoxia forever. Of course, in addition to these, there are many young girls on both sides of the street, shyly flirting with the boy riding the horse. However, the powerful Miss Luo followed closely behind Suchen, blocking all these flirtatious glances without missing a beat, and glared back fiercely. Suchen was unable to bear the enthusiasm of these girls. He kicked the horse's belly and sped up through the crowd. The guilt in his heart and the suspicion about the dry well in Luofu's old house weighed in his heart. He had to go back and rest quickly, and then immediately find out the truth about the dry well. Declining everyone's invitation, he woke up from a night of practice full of energy the next day. He was pleasantly surprised to find that he had made some breakthroughs in his cultivation at the beginning of the 7th level of Qi martial arts, and was just shy of reaching the 7th level. Intermediate level. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1170. Chapter 1170. It's the hardest to bear the kindness of a beauty. After thinking about it for a moment, Suchen understood that this must be because of the fierce battle with the demon last night, which consumed all the spiritual power and energy in his body. Sure enough, only the most extreme battle can make people progress quickly. Without alerting anyone, Suchen quietly went to Luofu's old house with his tools. The place is in ruins, with houses burned to charcoal and black rubble everywhere, some of which are still smoking. When Suchen came to the dry well, he was surprised to find that the area around the dry well was intact and even the weeds growing beside the well were green and lush. But within a 10-foot radius of the dry well, all shrubs and weeds were reduced to ashes. Seeing this scene, Suchen narrowed his eyes slightly. Taking the shovel he brought with him, he jumped down into the dry well with a slight jump and landed steadily at the bottom. I knocked around and found that everything was solid and there was nothing unusual about it. Suchen wielded the shovel and dug 3 feet into the ground. 3 feet later, it was still dirt. Suchen wielded the shovel again and dug 6 feet into the ground. Still soil. He became more stubborn and did not believe in evil, so he kept digging deeper. Only after he was a foot deep did some water droplets begin to seep out of the soil. After transporting the soil to the ground, Suchen jumped into the bottom of the well again. Just as he was about to continue digging, the muddy boots on his feet suddenly stunned him. The soles of these boots are white, why have they turned black now? Suchen raised one foot and looked at the mud on the sole of his foot. He suddenly discovered that the originally yellow-red soil had turned black without even realizing it. No. It wasn't the soil that turned black, but the seeping water. It's black. Suchen leaned down and got a drop of black mud. He put it to the tip of his nose and smelled it. He suddenly felt a sense of violence suddenly surge in his body. Suchen used his spiritual power to suppress this strange feeling. Go down. He realized that there must be something fishy about this black mud. However, before he could continue to investigate, a roar suddenly came from the depths of the ground, which shook Suchen's body to the point where he could hardly control his spiritual energy and almost burst into violence. Immediately afterwards, the entire dry well ground shook, and bricks and stones continued to fall from the four walls. Suchen was shocked and quickly stepped on the well wall and jumped to the ground 3 or 2 times, and escaped. With a boom sound, the entire dry well collapsed, and countless soil, vegetation fell into the well, instantly erasing everything here. Suchen retreated to a safe place, looking at the place where the dry well used to be with some horror. When the roar came out just now, Suchen felt that he couldn't use any spiritual power in his body, so he climbed to the ground completely relying on the strength of his body. Just a roar had such terrifying power that he instantly lost his ability to fight. This kind of existence has far exceeded after reaching the level of Suanhui realm. Even ordinary Jinhui realm monks would not let Suchen feel this way. We must report to the sect as soon as possible. This place is definitely a dangerous place. Suchen carefully scraped off the black mud on the soles of his shoes, put it in a small porcelain bottle, and then left here quickly. Outside the gate of Luo City, Suchen led a black horse and stood by the roadside. Luo Yuanxing looked at the young man in front of him with some emotion, and handed a package of things in his hand to Suchen. Knowing that you don't like publicity, this time I represent all the big families in Luo City and tens of thousands of people in Luo City to see you off. This is a little bit of our thoughts, please accept it. Suchen opened the package and found a total of 200 low-grade spiritual stones. Thanks to Uncle Luo and everyone for their kindness, Suchen accepted it. Although the incident of blood shadow in Dry Well has not been resolved, you have eliminated 2 demons for Luo City. I will personally write a letter to report this matter to the Vajragate Foreign Affairs Hall. Both of your tasks have been successfully completed, Luo Yuanxing stroked his beard and said. For this, Suchen could only bow his hands and say thank you. The boy has been living in the Luo family these days, causing a lot of troubles and benefiting a lot. From now on, if the Luo family needs a young man, they can send someone to the King Kong Gate to let him know. The young nephew will definitely arrive as soon as possible. Good. It is enough to say that I have a good nephew. It's a long journey, but I've sent it here. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. See you someday, Luo Yuanxing said loudly. Suchen bowed, stood up and mounted his horse. Suchen. Will you come again? With a sweet cry, Luo Bingning ran towards here holding a long skirt. Today, she is lightly painted with makeup, wearing matching long and short clothes, and with her charming face, she is particularly endearing. She knows that Suchen will be here today. If she leaves, she can't stay no matter what. So she dressed up specially today, hoping to leave her most beautiful figure in Suchen's heart. Suchen smiled slightly and said firmly yes, I will. Luo Bingning's originally tearful eyes immediately turned into 2 beautiful crescents. She stamped her feet and shouted keep your word. I swear this life. Suchen just spit out 4 short words. But these 4 words are enough. Online games, I really don't want to have unlimited fusion. Author, 7 years. Chapter 1171. Chapter 1171 Excess Rewards. I am not as generous as my benefactors. Luo Bingning shyly walked up to Suchen, raised her face, and asked softly with a trembling voice, am I beautiful? Pretty. Are you excited? Jumping so fast. Luo Bingning burst out with a smile as bright as a flower, then took out a sachet from her arms and handed it to Suchen with great care. Her face turned red and she said softly, "This is the safe sachet I sewed. You must take it with you." Suchen took a deep breath, took the sachet, and hid it carefully in his arms. He knew that this small sachet was not just a sachet, it contained Luo Bingning's entire body and mind. The sound of horse hooves was far away. Luo Bing stared at the young man's disappearing figure, and couldn't help but burst into tears. Luo Yuanxing gently patted his granddaughter's shoulder and sighed. "Suchen is a dragon among people, and he has a heavy burden on his heart. Our little Luo family can't hold him back. I think Suchen's wise nephew is by no means a heartless and unjust person. Since you belong to him, you must learn to be considerate and understand him. People always have to learn to grow up." 2 days later, Suchen finally returned to the Vajra Gate and handed over the mission in the Foreign Affairs Hall. "The Luo family has already told you about you through flying pigeons." The steward of the Foreign Affairs Hall looked at the calm young man in front of him with slight surprise. "I didn't expect you to actually wipe out those Hualan bandits." "Well, the bottle of black mud with demonic aura that you gave me is very important. The sect decided to upgrade the mission of Blood Shadow in Dry Well, the old residence of the Luo family, to the level of Suanhui realm." Suchen frowned and reminded, "The roar in the Dry Well gave me the feeling that it was at least a deterrent that can only be possessed by Jinhui realm monks. I'm afraid that the Suanhui realm." The steward smiled slightly. "It's rare for you to think about the section. But the sect has its own considerations on this matter, so you don't need to worry about it." Then, the steward handed him a small jade bottle and said, "The mission is completed. This is what you want, the spirit condensing pill, in exchange." Suchen felt hot in his heart and quickly took the jade bottle. Opening the cork, a stream of pure spiritual power escaped. Suchen took a deep breath and suddenly felt that all the spiritual power in his body was moving. "Huh? Why are there 3? Suchen looked at the elixir in the jade bottle and asked doubtfully. The steward smiled and said, "This is an extra reward for you. You have overcompleted the Hualan bandit mission, and your contribution points have increased by 50%, which is 75 points. Although the Dry Well Blood Shadow mission has not been resolved, this is due to the sect's incomplete intelligence. For you, an ordinary 7th level Qi martial artist, from a disciple's point of view, it can be regarded as overfulfilling the task. Moreover, you have also won the sect a huge reputation in Luo City, so you deserve these 3 spirit condensing pills." Suchen nodded, thanked him, and left. The steward looked at his retreating figure and muttered to himself, "The Vajra sect has not seen such an outstanding disciple for a long time. The 7th level of Qi martial arts can complete Qi martial arts. It is really rare that even 8 levels cannot complete the task. I hope he can become the mainstay of the sect in the future." Suchen's return made the full-healing disciples very happy. Normally they didn't feel it, but when Suchen was absent from the sect for more than 10 consecutive days, they always felt a little weak when facing the Nanlongguan disciples. Lu Sheng's injury has been healed, and with Suchen's Xiaohuan Dan, it's hard not to think about getting better soon. You know, when Suchen was pierced by Zhao Gang's spike in the shoulder, he took 2 or 3 Xiaohuan Dan continuously, and it only took a day. This small rejuvenating elixir is extremely effective in treating ordinary wounds and internal injuries. "My benefactor, there is something you must know," Yajiao said to Suchen with a solemn expression. Suchen motioned for him to continue. "Jin Shengtai's brother Jin Shenyang was released from detention yesterday. His strength has reached the 9th level of Kaiwu." Suchen raised his brows, feeling a little surprised. However, that was all. Seeing that Suchen didn't take it seriously, Lu Sheng said anxiously, "My dear benefactor, please don't be careless. This Jin Shenyang is by no means an ordinary disciple. Since he can be ranked among the top 10 masters of the Vajra sect Qi martial realm, he is by no means an ordinary person. Rumor has it that he has a unique skill, which is a mysterious martial arts skill, and its power is extraordinary." Suchen nodded and thanked Lu Sheng for the reminder. After a brief pause, he smiled at Lu Sheng and said, "Before the decisive battle between me and that Jin Shenyang, you should stay with us. Anyway, there is no shortage of stewards at the spiritual array. You can bring your sister-in-law over and live here together so that everyone can be taken care of." Lu Sheng was stunned, and then his eyes turned slightly red. He bowed deeply to Suchen, and he kept 1,000 words in his heart, "I can't thank you enough for the kindness." He didn't expect Suchen, a 17-year-old boy, to be so considerate. Knowing that Jin Shenyang has made a breakthrough, you can guess that Jin Shengtai will definitely become arrogant again. If he leaves Suchen's protection, he will inevitably suffer Jin Shengtai's revenge. As expected, my benefactor cannot be treated as an ordinary young man. His mind and courage are not as good as mine, which has lived for more than 40 years. Looking at Suchen's leaving figure, Lu Sheng sighed.